Kristin Luck is the founder of 3 marketing and analytics companies that she led to successful exits. She currently serves as an advisor and growth strategist to a number of cutting-edge marketing and analytics technology and services firms through her consultancy, Scalehouse. She is also passionate about supporting founders in international markets execute their entry into the US. Let's see what makes Kristin so buzzworthy. Welcome to the show, Kristin. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
You look like you're in one of those like bed and breakfast in an exotic location. Is this your office behind you?
No, I'm not in a bed and breakfast. This is my actual home. And
that beautiful.
That is an etching that I took off the wall of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, like a lifetime ago, 15 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
cool. So I've not been to Cambodia yet.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. But yeah, a guy helped me do it. He held the paper up and I did the etching and I rolled it up and took it home. I think I paid like $5 US for it. Then of course I brought it back to the US and then it was $400 to frame it.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's yeah. But the lady friend, she takes she's been to Italy a few times and she gets street artist sketches of the skylines of the cities that she goes to. And they're all different sizes. And she's like, you can't get the frames for this. And so here's a life hack for everybody who's listening. Go to Michael's Frame Shop in the back right there. You can get a coupon for 50% off, buy one, get one free, pretty much any day of the week. Okay. And half the time they'll have their little newspaper inserts right at the front door. And there's a coupon in the back. 50% off. And they do a good job.
Yeah.
They even do the wraps in the back. They do mountings. They do all that stuff. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Never spend full price on your framing.
Right. But if there's nothing else you get from this podcast today, it's the
That's it.
Tip. This is not brought to you by Michael's.
Michael's Tips by Michael Buzinski. There you go.
Right. Exactly. I'll Michael all the time.
Gosh darn it, people like me, right? So you have been a busy young lady with how many? It was. Did I hear? It was it. I said I actually said this just a few moments ago in the intro, but then we got talking in the green room. Two or 3 successful exits.
I've had 3 exits to private equity. Yeah,
that is amazing. Now, and they're all been in the same industry.
They have been.
So usually I've, some of my friends have exited and they'll stay in the same industry, but then they'll have a different twist to what they're going to do. So I have a friend of mine who sold a $10 million Google Ads company, and that's all they did. And now I think what they're doing now is like more of that full service. So it's not just that. So it doesn't compete, ... right? So how is it that you were able to stay in the same service in the same industry? How does that look like? Because as most people know, that you usually have a non-compete.
Yeah, usually you have a non-compete. And I did on all of my businesses for a certain period of time. I mean, usually your non-compete, is connected to an earnout, and that goes from anywhere from 2 years to 5 years. I was really fortunate on my first venture, because it was a services-based company, not a tech company. I didn't have a non-compete that prohibited me from working in the industry. It was just around creating the same service. So then my next company was a tech company.
Gotcha.
And then when I sold that, the company after that bought it was also a tech company. And then when I exited Decipher, which was my last firm, which I exited at the end of 2014, I did actually have a pretty lengthy non-compete, almost 5 years, because I wanted to exit at the time that we sold. So I had rolled over a little bit of equity, but not much. But I had managed to get it narrow enough so it was really only specific to the main competitors for the company. So it didn't working in the sector. It just from working for those main competitors. And that's one piece of advice that I always give to people on non-competes, whether you're selling a company or you're joining a company. Don't take those lightly. and really negotiate on them. I've seen too many people end up in situations where they've been terminated or left a company and then realize that they can't work in the sector that they spent their whole career in.
Right.
And I definitely have an appreciation for the firms that are purchasing companies. I want to protect what they just purchased. They obviously don't want the founders to go out and compete against them again. But it's really different when you're an employee and you're trying to make a living. And I feel a lot of times people just think, oh, I want the job, and so I'm just going to sign whatever they give me without realizing that every single thing you sign is a negotiation.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I mean, we have some new laws that just came out not too long ago that is really limiting what, companies can do in your non-competes. But that does not lend to your exits as an owner.
It does not.
It's completely different. And I think that a lot of people are misconstruing that, oh, I have a right to work. You do. But as an owner, you're not working. You're owning and you're selling, and they don't want to compete against that. So what made you want? So you exited the service, you got into tech. Now it's like you've done a service business. Now you've done a tech business. What was the spin on the third venture then?
Well, the third venture was also a tech business. So it was
just different type of tech.
Just a different type of tech, because my second business was a data visualization platform. And then the third business was, I sold my second business to the third business. The third business was then more of a data collection platform. And at that point, they were a services-based business. So they weren't actually licensing their software. And that's what I thought was an interesting opportunity. I had never actually licensed software up into that point. So I developed it. I used it within the context of a services-based business, but I hadn't actually gone into the software licensing space. And that's sort of like my guiding principle, I think, for anything that I do that's new or different, or any career change I make, is like I have to be learning something new that maybe I hadn't done before.
That makes sense.
That was the impetus behind that. Yeah.
Gotcha. So was it more of a SWAS where you had the software with the service?
It started out that way. Yeah. And even when we sold it, services were still probably 60 to 70% of our business. I mean, I think what we thought is that we had this great service business that was running off the platform that we then started licensing. And I think our hypothesis was, oh gosh, we're going to start licensing the software, and then all of our services clients are going to migrate over. So there'll be some cannibalization, but it'll be good because the software valuations, at least at that time, were higher than the services valuations. But we actually didn't see that. We did have some clients migrate over, but for the most part, it sort of just allowed us to build a whole new customer base, because the folks that were getting services wanted to remain getting services. They didn't want to license software. They were working with us because there were already other software solutions out there they could have licensed, and they didn't. So we never lost those clients. So it was good in some ways, because we never actually saw a dip in revenue, which we thought we were going to do. We thought our revenue would dip, but our profitability would go up, which is fine. But we actually never saw that. In fact, when we ended up selling, we thought our software business would be the larger part of our business at that point, but it just didn't turn out that way, because we didn't have that level of cannibalization.
I think that you're touching on a point where I'm at, even in my company, where that software with the service, not necessarily having to license it out, because I think that there are companies and industries that just lend to the service, but the ability to utilize software, regardless of whether you're just licensing it or just putting it in with your service, either way, you're SWAS, right, at that point. Right. But I think that service-based businesses really need to be thinking about this, because being just service, it puts you at risk, and being just software also puts you at risk, because there's so much. It's that melding of the two, and then creating frameworks around your methodology that I think is where people are going to be bringing that value. And if you don't want to, for those who are listening, if you don't want to trade your time for money, you have to have something leveraged, and technology is one of the easiest thing to leverage with your service. And it makes you very, very sticky if you embed that in leveraging the outcomes that you create for your clients. And so it's kind of lending to what Kristin is saying here. So do you guys ever look at like when you're doing those services, you said you added that component, but when they leave, do they then license, or are you finding that they just kind of wash their hands completely and go to another service provider?
It depends. I mean, we did have some that wanted to move to licensing, but I would say in the rare occasion that we lost a services client, which was pretty low. I mean, our churn rates were sub 15%.
Nice.
They would be going to another service provider. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I do think, to your point, and particularly now, like when I launched my first business, which was it was a tech business, but it was a services business. There weren't that many platforms out there. I mean, I launched in 2000.
Okay.
Yeah, I was competing against 2-3 platforms. Now there's like hundreds in the data space, hundreds and hundreds. And so there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more clutter. There's a lot more platform switching that goes on. And so also because of this, and I'm sure you've probably seen some of this in your work too, software licensing trends have changed because there's so many different platforms. So it used to be people were not, people didn't object to having to license software, versus now where I feel like people, because they're already licensing so many platforms and so many different add-ons and pieces that plug into different platforms, I feel like there's more of a reluctance to sign an annual contract or a multi-year contract. And so I think people had to become more creative in terms of how they license software. And I also think, to your point, it's where services become a lot more important, because if a client is having good experiences on your platform and they're getting good service, they're less likely to switch, because it's a pain to switch.
It is, especially when you're talking, like for us, we have a CRM, right? And client relations management is something that too many companies overlook. And then those who have, they've licensed the software. So like say like HubSpot or Salesforce, and they've dove into these really complex softwares. And it's just like, they're not even scratching the surface because they don't know what they don't know. Right. And I think that's where that service and that SWAS really comes in. For us, we've found is that getting people into a successful rhythm with tools like CRMs is much stickier than sitting there trying to be the people who are just, because there's people who are like, just get it done, right? That's great until they go, okay, well, we want somebody else to get it done. And it's like, but you have everything embedded into that software that's making it get done really well. Right. And so yes, there is a reluctance to switch systems when you have something that's embedded as a CRM. But also the methodologies of like having to switch how you're approaching it can be another reason they don't want to leave, especially for giving them the output that you're promising. Like, I think that's one of the things that I see a lot of younger entrepreneurs are like, well, what's the least amount of work for the most amount of money, right? Which is great, but you got to have the most amount or the highest amount of output for your clients. What pain are you subsiding? What dream are you helping them attain? And if you're not doing one of those two things, I don't care what software you have, they're not going to pay for it, right? Because we don't even hear licensing anymore. It's subscription based.
It's subscription.
Right? Yeah. Right. That's the new word for licensing. Nobody wants an annual unless you're getting a discount for it. But that's and then that's where you get into the tech marketing. And that's why I'm not in that realm there, because it's just not my gig. I'm a people person. And, and so our softwares are there to relieve the human element so that they have more bandwidth to do what they, to work in their zone of genius. Right. Absolutely. And I think, and in data, I mean, we can go down that road. I mean, I love the fact that you've been in that data analysis and reporting for so long, because there's so in the small to medium sized sectors, it's not there. Like, still to this day, there's so many platforms that could show business owners a dashboard of what their business looks like, and in seconds say, that's what I should pay attention to today. because that's the red light, and they
absolutely.
don't do it.
And this is kind of goes back to your point about CRM systems. I advise companies that are anywhere from, sub 10 million to, 150, 200 million. And I have gone into companies that are sizable, doing 60 million in revenue, and they're tracking everything on an Excel spreadsheet. And I get a lot of pushback about recommending a CRM and saying like, oh my gosh, you're not using a CRM. Like, let's get that going. And they said, well, we've never used a CRM, and we're 60 million in revenue. And I said, you're at 60 million in revenue, despite what you've done, not because of. There's a difference there. Yes. Imagine how big that company could be if they just had a CRM and they had that dashboard in front of them every day, telling them exactly what was going on in their business. And it's not really a joke, but like I say this all the time within the data and analytics sector, because it's kind of the evolution of market research. Market research firms are literally the worst at both marketing and research for their own brands. They understand nothing about it. They don't value it. They don't want to pay for it.
Is that crazy? Yeah. It's like the dentist with bad teeth, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. It is amazing. But I think that it has to do with the fact that, for Gen Xers, we didn't grow up with the technology. And if you were exposed to technology, you always thought it was super expensive, right?
Right.
Because I remember like back in the 2000s when I first started my business, that was like, you do market research. That was tens of thousands of dollars to do market research of any kind without data analytics subscriptions, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the new generation where technology is all around them, but nobody's taught them the value of data. Like it wasn't even until 2016, was that iOS 14 came out in 2016, when everybody learned what third-party data was.
Yeah.
And they didn't care until it was taken away from them. And then all of a sudden they had to become marketers again, or learn how to be marketers, because a lot of these folks came in just going, oh, I just push button, get banana. And my client very happy with me, right? And it's just like, yeah. And then that goes away, and you're like, okay, so where are your fundamentals? And they don't have any because they were never taught fundamentals. And so if you don't have fundamentals, you don't know what numbers to even look for. Therefore, you're not looking for numbers.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gets caught in this. You're talking about the $50 million company. It's probably founded by somebody who's just a rock star of selling their idea.
Yeah.
And it's like they hear enough yeses to where they don't care about the no's, and they don't realize how many the opportunity of cost of not following up on those no's.
Yeah. I think too, certainly when I was in university, which, I graduated high school in 1990. So I was at college in the early 90s. But I remember, I majored in journalism, and I remember, I take a bunch of marketing classes. And back then, marketing was just thought of as this kind of creative, fluffy pursuit. And now it's super data driven. But I think the folks that are really excelling in marketing now, they really wrap their heads around that. Like they really understand the data. And when I say data, like I am talking about basic math. And I feel like every time, sometimes like I'll mention like, oh yeah, you really have to be able to analyze and interpret data as a marketer. And people's like, oh my God, they get all nervous. And I'm like, I'm talking about basic addition and subtraction here. Like this is not complicated math. But I can remember, leaving a board meeting and talking to the CMO of a company I was advising. And I said, listen, for the next board report, this is really what you need to be showing. This is what the board is asking for. And she looked at me and she said, I'm not really a numbers person. And I said, well, you might want to be looking for another job then, because marketing is a numbers game now.
100%. I agree with you. I was born dyslexic, and found out that I'm also, I was born, I didn't know I was dyslexic, but I was born ambidextrous. And I was blessed with a very creative and analytical mind. I was a genius, not a genius. Math came easy to me. until it became theoretical math. I was
Yeah.
really bad with those. My dyslexia kept me from being good at like geometry, because memorizing theorems doesn't do something there. But you give me numbers that I can add, subtract, divide, and multiply and all that stuff. Yeah, hell yeah, let's go, baby. Yeah. And so for me, I really lucked out. But I see a whole generation of folks who've gone into the marketing because they said, oh, that's just going to be the creative space. And I worked with graphic designers who were bad with math. You know how slow they are? Yeah. Because they can't do fractions and ratios. And it's just like math is part of our world. And the more computers are part of our world, I think the more, regardless of what industry you're in, you know, so if you're listening to this, you know, and you don't like numbers, you must find somebody in your business that is good with numbers, and so that they can then translate that to you. So you have the information in your business to make a data-driven decision on whatever you're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think you can overcome your fear of working with numbers. I mean, I was not a natural numbers person. In fact, I remember before I went to take my SATs, my father bought me a book on math anxiety because I had scored so low on math on like the practice tests. And even when I went to university, like yourself, I wasn't great at theoretical math. And I remember they put me in I think they had a class called business math, which was basically like the class they put you in when you need to get your Bachelor of Science, but you're never going to pass theoretical math. And it was all problem solving, but it was all things that I understood. You know, like the math that I work with every day in marketing and in investment banking, because I do a fair amount of work in M&A and pre-M&A optimization as part of my consulting practice. That's all basic math. Like there's nothing that complicated there.
So if you were to say in marketing, what is the biggest or the most obvious KPI? And for those, KPI is a key performance indicator. So the part of the math, right? We're talking about dashboards. We're talking about data and making it. What is the one KPI that business owners in your experience overlook that costs them the most money?
Revenue generation. Almost never tie marketing back to whether it's generating revenue.
Attribution?
I'm sorry?
Attribution?
Yeah. They like no idea.
Like how the marketing actually did or did not get to an actual sale.
Correct. Like lots of metrics, like, oh my gosh, we got this many website hits, or we got this many leads from this event, or they've got all the metrics there. But then they never type, okay, well, that was great. It's fantastic. You spent $40,000 on a trade show, but how much revenue did it actually generate? And it's like, I don't know.
And so,
you know?
Yeah. And so how does, I don't know. So for the most of our listeners, they're small, medium-sized businesses. They're not, they don't have Fortune 500 companies or anything like that. Yeah. What's the first step for these, for our listeners to start connecting the dots to attribution?
Yeah. Well, I mean, metrics are directional. They tell you whether or not you're headed the right direction. They don't necessarily tell you whether the activity is working or not. Versus revenue, to me, is what tells me, is the activity that I'm investing in working? And is it working at a rate where it's costing me less, where it's costing me less money than the revenue that I'm generating? And there's this is the great thing about CRMs, of course, and marketing automation platforms, is that they can track all of these things. And also to have an understanding that some marketing activities are long game strategies and some are short game strategies, meaning that some activities are going to generate revenue, but over a longer period of time. So they take a little bit of patience, but they also generally cost less, versus a short game strategy, which is bada bing, I spent this much money and I expect this much revenue in a relatively short period of time. Maybe that's 3 to 6 months, depending on whether you're selling more of an enterprise sale product or you're selling something that is at a lower price point. But I do think that there's generally a disconnect for folks between the activity and whether or not it's generating revenue. And a lot of times that data that's missing gets filled in with anecdotes, and particularly from salespeople. So salespeople will go, oh my God, we went to this event. It was so amazing. There were so many people there. I talked to so many clients, and then 6 months goes by and you're like, okay, well, like what happened from that amazing event? Where's all the revenue from it? Didn't transpire. So like the data helps you cut through the noise about what people think is and isn't working, because data doesn't lie. It doesn't come up with its own stories, or it's not enthusiastic about an event. It either performed or it didn't perform. Yeah.
And which there you go.
Not always the most popular thing to say, but it's the truth. I think 9 times out of 10, when I'm looking through, people see around their marketing automation platform or just talking with their sales and marketing teams, that's the big miss. Like, they are tracking a lot of things, but there's things that make marketing and sales people feel good versus the ugly truth, which is it actually converting?